Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. We have really awesome speakers today from earthday.org that we will hear from shortly. Oh, Tara, did you raise your hand?
That was an accident. No worries.
Okay. We're still trickling in, so we'll give it a minute. But if you all would like to, if anyone would like to introduce themselves, if you are new to the VP3N or just want to say hi and tell us who you are, feel free to take yourself off mute. We can start with introductions for the first couple minutes as people start trickling in. I will start. My name is Joe. I'm the my title, Plastic Pollution Prevention Specialist at Clean Virginia Waterways, and I'm happy to newly be running this, the VP3N, the Virginia Plastic Pollution Prevention Network. Last month was our 5th year anniversary of the VP3N, which is very exciting. So thank you all for joining and helping to keep this group going.
Do you just kind of want to popcorn and let people say hi while you're waiting, Joe?
You can do that. I didn't want
to
to
introduce
tell people if they weren't ready.
Okay.
But Emily, perhaps I'll call on you. We talked today through email. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Yes, nice to meet everyone. My name's Emily Gallagher. I work with Keep Norfolk Beautiful in Norfolk, Virginia. I'm representing my team today, so it's nice to meet you all. Excited to hear about everything.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. And Emily, do you want to call on someone? Or would you rather I do that?
Sure. How about Evan?
Yeah, hey there, everyone. I'll be sure to give a more thorough introduction in just a moment during our presentation, but I'm Evan Raskin. I'm the National Campaign Manager for earthday.org. Yeah, I'm joined by my colleague Aminah. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Aminah Taariq-Sidibe. I'm the current manager of the End Plastics Initiative at Earth Day. And I can pass it over to Dylan.
How's it going, everyone? I'm Dylan Mason. I am the Public Policy Manager with Lynn Haven River Now here in Virginia Beach. I'll pass it over to Zach.
Hey, y'all. How's it going? I'm Zach Huntington. I'm the Marine Debris Strategy Director for Clean Virginia Waterways. I'll send it to Christina.
Christina. Well, I'll introduce Christina. She is the Director of Clean Virginia Waterways here in Virginia Beach. And I am Tara Pascarosa. I am the Development and Event Manager with Clean Virginia Waterways. And I used to work with Evan Raskin at Earth Day. So super stoked to see his face again and excited to have Earth Day presenting for us today. And I will go ahead and pass it over to the other Emily Bodsford.
Hi, everybody. My name is Emily Bodsford. I do the education and outreach for Clean Virginia Waterways and also help lead the ICC for Virginia. So excited to be here today. I will pass it on to Sasha.
Hello there. My name is Sasha. I am an intern with Clean Virginia Waterways, and recently I have been working with packaging and getting supplies shipped out to different places and groups.
Why don't we popcorn?
Yeah, all the CVW folks are calling each other, so I'm gonna break the mold. And David, would you like to introduce yourself?
I think you called my name, David. I'm really nobody with anybody, but do all kinds of cleaning things like beaches and streets and stuff like that.
Yeah, for us. Thanks for being here. Brianna, would you like to introduce yourself?
Brianna Heath with the George Washington Regional Commission. I'm the Environmental Services Coordinator. So I've been here for about a year, and prior to that, I was with the Northern Neck Planning District Commission. So that might be where you see my name before.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm just going down the list in the people tab. Bridget Reed's note taker. Is there a Bridget here or just the note taker? All right, we'll go to Kristen.
Hi, I'm Kristen Pullman with Lynnhaven River Now. I am the Community Outreach Manager, and I handle a lot of our marine debris, especially any sort of litter cleanups.
On, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Dawn Courier. I'm a park ranger with City of Hampton, and I'm also the city wildlife biologist. I do a lot of cleanups.
Very cool. Thank you. We'll hear from Dylan, Emily's. Katie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, I'm Katie Morgan. I am with NOAA's Marine Debris Program. I'm actually just coming back from a bit of some leave in another role, so glad to be here and love being in these meetings to hear about all things Virginia.
Thanks, Katie. And Megan just joined. Would you like to introduce yourself? Give me a second for the audio to get set up, maybe. Megan Quinn, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please feel free to do that. No worries either way. So I'd like to start off the meeting with any member updates. I'm glad that we all introduced yourself. Please feel free to put your name and organization in the chat so we can make connections that way. Oh, thanks, Christina. But does anyone have anything they want to share? We had a lot of really good updates in the last VP3N newsletter. So hopefully you all received that. Let me know if you did not, and I can get you on the mailing list. But any updates for this month? Feel free to share. I can start with a view from Virginia Waterways to break the ice. So we just had our stormwater workshop last week, and some of you I saw there. So thanks for attending that too. It went really well. We heard from a lot of great speakers across different topics, from researchers and different mapping tools. We even made some connections already to help resolve some foam issues down near Clean Virginia Waterways, which is awesome. And Clean Virginia Waterways is also starting an EPS phase out work group. That's similar to what we do here with the VP3N. It's going to be a monthly meeting on the second Friday of each month, but it's meant for anyone who is involved or wants to be involved in the foam ban starting July 1st, 2026. Our aim is to help food vendors transition away from the foam takeout containers before they get fully banned. And this is for food vendors with less than 20 sites. And so it's really important to help out these small businesses so that they have a seamless and an easy transition away from foam. The first meeting is actually going to be on this Friday, so the third Friday of this month. But after that will be the second Friday. So please feel free to get in touch if you'd like to join that, and I'll be happy to send you the meeting link and calendar invite for that new work group. And we also have a third work group for the plastic bag fee. In Virginia, each locality, each county can establish their own plastic bag fee for 5 cents. And we are hearing from efforts across the state on a plastic bag fee and how we can help each other with that. So also, if you're interested in attending that, feel free to reach out and I'll get you on the calendar invite. Yeah, Emily, go ahead.
I just want to put a plug in for the International Coastal Cleanup. If you haven't already signed up to be a site captain, please do. You can find out that information on our website. And yeah, you'll double your effort with your cleanups and contribute to some really valuable, important data for our state and globally. So.
Thanks, Emily. else have anything they want to share? I'll put it in the chat. Ever works best. Thank you, Tara. All right. With that, then, I would like to introduce our guest speakers for this month, Evan Raskin and Aminah Taariq-Sidibe from earthday.org. And they gave their titles already, but I will turn it over to you two to introduce yourselves more and start your presentation. Really excited to hear about this.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. We really appreciate it. Again, thank you for having us. I'm Evan with the national campaign here at earthday.org, joined by Aminah, and we're both really excited to talk with you about our program today. Thank you for pulling up the slides.
You can see them?
Yes, great.
Awesome. Yeah.
Wonderful. Why don't we go ahead and get started? Okay, so first we want to just give you a bit of a brief overview for earthday.org for anyone who isn't familiar. As the name implies, we are the global organizers of Earth Day on April 22nd. But rest assured, our environmental advocacy stretches throughout the entire year. There's a few core places in which we focus. We conduct advocacy at the federal, state, and local levels. And plastics is actually one of our core issue areas. You'll find us on Capitol Hill every year for the annual Plastics Hill Week. You'll find us talking with mayors and council members about regulations in their towns and cities. And of course, we're working at this at the state level wherever we can. Can everybody still hear me okay? It looks like it might be frozen.
You were cut off a little bit, but I can hear you now.
Okay, let's try reloading the camera. All right, everyone can see and hear me now? Great.
Yeah.
Okay. In addition to advocacy, we also have a robust education program that is evergreen throughout each year, regardless of our annual theme. We're always advocating for climate and environmental literacy. We believe that education is the first step towards adaptation. And any way that we are hoping to inspire change in our society, it starts in the classroom. Our goal is to make sure that climate literacy is a mandated and assessed part of every classroom, and we work at every level from school districts all the way up to the United Nations to help make that happen. Our Canopy project is our evergreen tree planting project, no pun intended. And since I want to say about 2012 or so, we've planted over 10 million trees through this program, including mangroves as well. It's part of our effort to promote biodiversity and climate action at the same time. And last but not least is our work on mobilization, making sure that as the first stop for many people in the public to find out about Earth Day, we are providing a robust platform that is able to help anyone, anywhere, be able to participate in Earth Day in a meaningful way, which we'll talk a little bit more on the next slide. Yes. As mentioned, we are the first stop that many folks will go to in order to determine what's going on for Earth Day, to understand why we're commemorating it each year. And as such, we always set an annual theme, one that is able to draw attention to a particular issue while also making it possible for folks of all backgrounds and all interests to get involved. This last year, our theme was Our Power, Our Planet, which had its core focus on renewable energy, but also really called upon the public to use the power that each and every one of us has to make a difference in a way that's meaningful to you and your community. And many of those events actually were focused on plastic prevention as a result. Of the 44,000 events that we've supported since 2020, almost half of them, in fact, have been cleanup events. They're incredibly popular, and at this point in the year, as all of you are well aware, they are exceptionally popular. We certainly welcome your collaboration, and anyone in the audience who is planning on participating in the International Coastal Cleanup or any volunteer activities at any time, you're always welcome to register them on our map. And in just a moment, I'm going to be dropping a link in the chat directly to that registration. We'd love to be able to share the activities that you're planning with our global audience. Anyone who's nearby is hopefully welcome to find and attend. So with that, why don't we go ahead and move on to the next slide.
Great. Thanks, Evan. Thank you, everyone, for having us here. I know we are among colleagues that already care about the plastic crisis. We know the science and the stakes. So I'm just going to talk a little bit more about how Earth Day has translated that knowledge into advocacy and like what resonated with the public and policymakers and what opportunities we see with local action and global change. Cleanups and other volunteer actions are visible, engaging, and inspiring. They help build the community, they create powerful images for press, they give people a sense of agency, and you can see the impact in real time. But as we all know, they are only part of a bigger picture. And that's not to downplay it. Every action matters, which is why we have a program specifically for cleanups and for volunteer action. But individual action and systemic change are two sides of the same coin. And that's why we have to really focus on the upstream drivers as well. So there's overproduction of plastics, which directly leads to fossil fuels. And we already know that nearly every major petrochemical company right now is expected to expand or even triple their plastic production as a response to declining demand for oil and gas. They want to move that energy into consumer products. There's also a lack of corporate accountability. So extended producer responsibility theories, they exist in theory, but they're very patchy and it depends on the region. And that leads into another major problem, which is gaps in policy and enforcement. So even where there are bans or restrictions on plastics, the enforcement lags and the burden often falls on the consumers rather than the producers. So these volunteer actions are very important, but they also reinforce a dangerous narrative that fixing plastics is only about individual responsibility and not systemic change, which is why Earth Day and other organizations in this coalition is also really involved with policy advocacy as well. So let's zoom out. At a global level, we have the United Nations negotiation on the Global Plastics Treaty through the Intergovernmental Negotiation Committee. Earth Day has been able to attend a couple INCs, including the last one. And we saw that despite the urgency of the problem, there is a fundamental divide in between countries that want to include binding controls on production and then those that want to focus only on waste management and recycling. So there are over 100 nations that are members of the High Ambition Coalition, which include the EU and members of the Global South that have called for production caps and phase downs, while major producing states like the US and Saudi Arabia prefer to keep production unregulated and shift the burden downstream. On top of that, the negotiation process was delayed because of procedural issues. During the contact groups, member states would go through each section of the treaty line by line, which takes a lot of time. And because the treaty currently relies on a consensus decision-making, a small group of holdout countries can block progress. So the consensus part is very broken. There was also a lot of industry lobbying at INC 5.2. We saw more industry representatives than representatives of all 27 EU countries combined. The small island and developing states, scientists, and frontline communities were also all outnumbered by lobbyists. Some fossil fuel representatives were even part of some member states' delegations. So there was definitely their interest very present, and that helped to delay the negotiations. We also saw that the US position did a kind of 180 during the negotiations, and we are in an administration where it's hard to make change at a federal level already. So this was really hard to see at an international level. But despite the narrative going around that INC has failed, that is not true, because we were successful in preventing a weak treaty from being passed, which would have been a nail in the coffin for us. People would have said like, oh, look, we did it, we tried, this is what you get. So I really want to emphasize the point that this negotiation isn't a complete failure because we are still in the game and the influence of civil society has been felt. So how do we make sure the global ambition translates to a real world change? That is by anchoring it locally. Policies are implemented on the ground, in schools, in municipalities, in state legislators, and communities are where culture changes. So when we see cities ban single-use plastics or adopt EPR, it also creates a proof of concept and political pressure, and that local action will feed into a global agreement. So we do really believe that local action still has influence at an international level. And at Earth Day, our call to action is to encourage key communities like school communities or faith groups to support plastic-free initiatives, support local bans, and implement reforms like the DC bottle bill. We also, like Evan mentioned, connect to volunteers and use their passion for cleanups and citizen science to leverage that for more systemic advocacy. So creating opportunities for them to talk to policymakers and attend hearings. And of course, we also emphasize collective power. Every action counts, but coalitions multiply impact, which is why we are really happy to be a part of this one and to see the work that everyone else is doing, because it will only build off of each other. And of course, communications and rhetoric is also a huge part of what Earth Day does. Our audience is the general public, and our approach in the last a few years, honestly, has been to shift plastic away from being seen as an environmental issue, like polluted beaches and marine systems, and then instead reframe it as a public health crisis, because policymakers move faster when the stakes are personal. And you can talk about, like, you know, the animals ingesting bottle caps and things like that, but it's another thing to talk about. Microplastics are now crossing into the placenta, and there are chemicals in formula packaging affecting infant development. So that really shifts the conversation. For example, our Babies versus Plastics report, which you may have seen, there was a lot of key findings that, of course, found microplastics are present in breast milk, in baby formula, and in products that are marketed safe for infants. Early exposure carries risks that we don't even fully understand, but they include endocrine disruption and developmental harm. So that's something that demands immediate action. And the response to the report was really good, because it wasn't just shared in scientific circles, it also broke into more mainstream news, parent forums, and also congressional talking points, talking about the impacts of plastics on babies specifically. And it combined the scientific authority, but also emotional resonance. And everyone cares about protecting children. That's something that is across all ideology. And this October, we are also releasing a new study, the You versus Plastics report. It's going to be a meta-analysis of health impacts across the human body. So where our other reports, Babies versus Plastics and Pets versus Plastics, focus on specific populations, this one broadens the lens, and it's supported by strong data, but it's also supposed to be digestible for the general public. And the main message is that every single person on Earth has plastics in them, and plastics are harmful to human health. But we don't want to end on like a very gloomy, doomy note. We also want to emphasize that there is a positive spin to it, because policy action works. And something else that we've learned in addition to the health framing is there's also an economic frame that's effective. During hard times, policymakers want to know the costs of different actions. And the World Bank already estimates that plastic pollution will cost the global economy $1.5 trillion annually in health and environmental social impacts. So that's a really strong fiscal argument. And there's also the element of fear on an individual level when it comes to economic stability. So our communication strategy has been to like distribute this knowledge in a very accessible way, back them up with real science, and then also use that information to lead to direct advocacy in terms of policy. So and maybe some of you were at the Hill Week in this past June in Washington. We used that report there in our meetings with legislators, and we were able to notice a shift where instead of being asked about recycling, we're being asked more about preventing health impacts and alternatives. So stories like that really move people have been really effective, because the facts alone don't just create urgency. But yeah, I think that leads into the next section.
Certainly. Yeah, Aminah, just to continue building off of that, I too found that at the Plastics Hill Week, it was that combination of public health and economic rhetoric that really seemed to capture the attention of policymakers on both sides of the aisle. I can think of a couple of really great examples, but one in particular that I'd love to highlight is when we met with Congressman Mike Ezell, who is a Republican Congress member representing a district in Mississippi. And we happen to have a constituent of his in our advocacy group who is an oyster farmer. And so he was able to speak firsthand to how his constituent was being affected economically, that his harvests were being contaminated with microplastics, reducing the quality of the seafood that he could sell to market. Furthermore, the congressman himself actually had turned out to be a huge fan of oysters. So then we were able to have this conversation about how you've probably eaten this man's oysters. You have ingested microplastics as a result, and we can tell you exactly what types of health impacts could be associated with that ingestion. It's no secret that the current Congress is one that's going to have a hard time passing anything in the immediate future. But what we observed this year at the Hill Week was that regardless of who we spoke to, there was this clear understanding that, oh, while maybe there are certain areas of the policy language that we could debate, what's not up for debate is whether or not this is a public health issue, that this is affecting people's well-being. That was felt broadly across all of the meetings that we had, and it's something that we're hoping can lead us to future success down the road at every level of government. And as far as how can we work together moving forward, as mentioned, we always welcome your collaboration on mobilization. Again, the link in the chat is there for any events that you want to register either now or later. We're always happy to help our audience have more opportunities to be part of the movement as a volunteer. When it comes to work that's specifically oriented on plastics, there's a couple of places where we'd love to focus in. Right now, we're in the process of developing our ground game. How are we going to mobilize volunteers for Earth Day 2026? How are we going to coordinate them in a consistent fashion moving forward? And as I mentioned, we identified a few key areas of advocacy, one of them being plastic prevention. Right now, what we are doing is honing in on target states, districts where we can help support active policy momentum. And so as we move into the Q&A, if any of you are particularly tracking a piece of legislation or a proposal within a local government, we'd love to hear about it and make it open to consideration with our work. After all, we're just up the road in Washington, D.C., and so lending a hand in Virginia is comparatively easier than in some places in the country. And likewise, regardless of volunteer mobilization, we're always open to sign-on opportunities. If VP3N as a whole or individual members are looking for organizational endorsement on a piece of advocacy, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to be able to join with you in that way. Use resources such as Babies versus Plastic and other areas in which we've built knowledge and rhetoric to support your causes. And so with that, I believe we've come to the end of our slideshow, and we'd love to open up the floor to discussion. Are there any questions from the audience?
Awesome presentation, y'all.
Thank you, Tara.
I will start it off with a question. I know when I worked with you guys at Earth Day, there was a Virginia campaign. And so I'm imagining that you sort of take on the role of carrying some of the Virginia work. Is there any Virginia-centric work still going on at Earth Day, or are you all still interested in sort of creating that facet of like specified Virginia work that you do?
So the way that we are currently trying to coordinate our on-the-ground expansion is through first kind of reinvigorating our volunteer program, make sure that we have all of the members that are with us and are joining us ready to take action on a national basis. Then expanding into 3 key states for like developed ground activations. Those are currently Michigan, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina. And I believe that Virginia would be the next state that we would be going to after that. As I mentioned, in the meantime, we do have kind of our high-level resources. Aminah and I are available to participate as advocates in our own right. And there's a certain level of messaging that we can also do with our Virginia lists as well. Our hope is that once we have volunteer leaders established in each of the 3 states I mentioned before, then Virginia would be next up for consideration.
Sweet. Thanks so much, y'all.
Of course.
Any other questions?
Joseph, I couldn't quite hear you there.
If anyone has any more questions, feel free to take yourself off mute.
Yeah, sure thing.
I have a couple questions though, so
yeah,
sorry, I'm in here.
Hey, Joseph, you're a little garbly, just FYI. You might want to take it off video.
Yes, we'd love to hear
your. Sorry?
I was just saying we'd love to hear your questions, Joseph.
On your world cleanup map, I was wondering if those are just pinpoints for registered cleanups, or is there any data associated on those points?
Just to clarify, Joseph, are you asking if there is any metrics around trash cleaned up or items found, like the different ways in which we can be doing citizen science together? Is that what you have in mind?
Just kind of how that map worked and what's displayed on it.
Yes. So the map that is currently, well, what's currently linked in the chat right now is the registration. And if you go to the registration, you'll see that we'll have links to both our general events map and our cleanup map. The general events map does contain the cleanups as well, but it also contains events of all other stripes. Of interest to this coalition might be the cleanup map specifically, as it'll show volunteer events that are focused particularly on plastics. And this particular map is really geared towards activation. It answers the who, what, where, when, and why type questions around volunteer activations. How can I, as an individual, find out when volunteers are gathering to clean up a beach or a park or wherever have you? What we do have for organizers, though, is also a reporting system as well. You can share back after the cleanup, tell us about what you found, both in terms of quantitative data, like X number of pounds picked up, or other ways in which you could be measuring the physical impact of your cleanup. And then there's also a qualitative component as well. Was there an interesting narrative? Was there a volunteer that was particularly moved by the experience in some way? That a story about pollution in the area? Are there certain photos that you would like to share for possible inclusion on our platform somewhere? We have all of those resources available. And something I'd also love to share with all of you is the contact information for Michael Karapetian. He is our cleanup manager, and he loves connecting with folks just like the ones in this coalition, both to help them connect with our audience, but also so that we can be more directly supportive of any efforts that you're planning. So I'll just go ahead and put that in the chat for you.
Yeah, also just add that since some of the events are hosted by other organizations, they oftentimes release media stories after the fact that kind of share that information. I know that recently I attended a cleanup at Anacostia River with 5 gyres, and they released, I think, something afterwards to show how much like pounds of trash. So I think that would be a good reference point to see what organizations are working for if you're like more on the expert side. And then look up the organization and see what type of stories they've released or data they've released.
Absolutely. There's a lot of different ways that we can spread a good narrative here. A couple of examples that we could get from past and hopefully future work as well. For us is one, participating in a global underwater cleanup, rather a Pan-Pacific underwater cleanup. That's where all of the events were held. Just at the flagship site alone, we worked with scuba divers from the world's largest underwater activity organizations to pick up 3 tons of trash. And that was really emblematic of each location that we dove at. And we were able to illuminate this great story where we had actually governors and presidents of states at some of these cleanups who were seeing just what really lies below the waves in a way that perhaps they hadn't before. Proper documentation of what we found really went a long way with our advocacy there. Similarly, we are also working on an ongoing project called Underserved Community Cleanups, where we are looking at communities that are disadvantaged in one way or another, in need of greater waste management or economic support across the board. And helping folks within the communities, especially if I recall correctly, folks who are unhoused, be able to access work opportunities, not just during the one cleanup, but on an ongoing basis. We're looking to bring the program to more cities. So if there's anywhere in Virginia that seems like it would be a great candidate for an underserved cleanup, Michael would love to discuss that with you. earthcity.org. Right, and there is his email right in the chat.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Please let us know if there are any other questions from the group. It's been wonderful speaking with you today.
Yeah, questions? I have another one. In your babies versus plastic report, Aminah, you had mentioned that it didn't just go to scientific communities, but ended up in things like parent forums. And I was wondering what kind of outreach was done to get it into other groups like that.
Yeah, so there are a few organizations that specifically target parents, like Moms Clean Air Force. But I think that once it was released into the media, parents just immediately became concerned. So it was a more organic attraction, I think, to parent forums. But we did have like other organizations related to parents or children's health to help share the message as well.
Yes, yeah, Aminah's answer is very much on point. Those organizations that we have connections with and that we reached out to certainly showed their own interest. But once this started hitting the news, it really became organic, and that just led to further publications picking it up. When it comes to a media narrative, it's hard to beat something that feels urgent and relative to parents and families. Really what our goal with this report was to create what we call dinner table conversations. How can we position plastics and pollution in such a way that it's relevant to the conversations that any family would be having around the dinner table? Yeah, and I think that ended up leading to the universal reception that we ended up seeing.
It's great. It really shows the importance of collaborative opportunities in this space and sharing stories with different groups and how people relate to the data and to the stories in different ways.
Yeah, it really did feel like a good learning opportunity for us. I think one of the biggest takeaways that I took from that project was the power of a human face in a campaign. That, well, I'm sure all of us here feel compelled by imagery of seabirds and turtles and other wildlife that are affected by plastics. The universality of human empathy in particular is just such a powerful driver for people feeling like environmental action is relevant to their own existence. Part of our climate literacy program is really helping people become more aware of their inherent connection to nature. But as we build those connections, I think it's always very important for us to be reminding people that this isn't something that happens only in a far off place, that this is your community and your family and your loved ones that are involved in both the issue and the solution.
And I'll also add that in the report, we try to give like practical recommendations for safer alternative materials. And I think that's just another best practice. If you're gonna, like, again, if you're gonna come with people with the gloom and all this heavy news, it's really important to have like an alternative or a way for them to see it like out of the situation.
Right. Yes. Yeah, we don't only want to show the problem, but also the solution. And especially when we can show the efficacy of a solution in different ways. I think that can be really powerful, both on a personal and on an institutional level. I'm thinking about how when we work with businesses and other types of institutions, like for instance, before my time at Earth Day, I worked on a special project with the British Embassy here in DC to help them form a plan to eliminate plastics from their day-to-day operations. And one of the most important things that we had to consider in this project and everything I've worked on since is if we're going to ask a business to eliminate plastics or to be sustainable in some type of way, how can we show that this is also fiscally responsible? How can we show that this is actually an improvement on your business model? I think the same can be true for households as well. Whatever stakeholder group we're looking at, how do we position the sustainable action we want to take as added value to their lives and not just a solution to a problem on its own?
A really good point. I'm definitely take a look at the report to see what kind of alternatives you mentioned. I think I can get some ideas, or that's really important to know regarding especially our EPS ban in Virginia. One of the things we're trying to do at Clean Virginia Waterways and with the start of our EPS phase out work group is to help these businesses find sustainable alternatives that won't be too much of a burden on their cost or yeah, so take a look at that report and see what's mentioned.
Yeah, that seems incredibly timely. To my understanding of the way that the EPS ban is being rolled out, right now is the period in which these small businesses are intended to be finding those solutions. So I'm glad that they have folks like you who are helping guide them through the process. I think that's a great way for us to be serving the community.
Thank you. You had mentioned the importance of putting a face to the campaign or to the story, and that brought me back to the constituent you found in Missouri, was it?
It was Mississippi, yes.
Mississippi? So I was wondering if you could share a little bit about the backstory to that. Like, how did you, what kind of campaigns or community outreach is being done in those areas? How did you find that you had a constituent in that area?
Well, I wish that we could take the credit for finding this man in Mississippi, but he actually showed up to the Break Free from Plastic Coalition's meetings before we met him. And so through our involvement in the coalition, he ended up on the same advocacy team as me. And I'm really glad that he took the time to do it. This man and his daughter, they drove 30 hours from Mississippi to come to Capitol Hill and make sure that they were testifying face-to-face with their member of Congress. And in this particular point of advocacy, I don't think that our point would have been felt to nearly the same extent without him. And I'm thinking about just all of the other ways in which this can be positioned as we start looking towards other advocacy opportunities. Yeah, attaching specifically a constituent face in advocacy is always going to be most effective, given that that is a person that an elected official is directly responsible for. Finding particular affinity groups within those audiences, I think, raises that in particular. In the case of this moment in Congress, the fact that this man was part of the farming and fishing community, which Congressmember Ezell was on record a staunch supporter of, really made a difference in him being heard above the voices of perhaps other constituents that should be considered equally, but maybe not always are. Similarly, looking at the same way that the Babies versus Plastic report was so effective with the general public, expecting and new families can be very sympathetic voices in advocacy. In fact, another member of my advocacy group, I felt, was able to win over some of the people that we met with in other congressional offices by saying, like, my sister just had a baby. I now have a new niece who I'm trying to have the best possible start in life. And so how can you be part of the solution for making sure that this child grows up in a safe and healthy environment? Faith leaders sometimes can be helpful in crossing the aisle as well. If you know that someone that you're trying to work with isn't the biggest friend of progressive policies, being able to have a trusted messenger take that message to them saying, hey, I know this faith leader who really wants to bring something to you. That's somebody who represents authority in the community outside of government and may be able to sway a conversation. Aminah, do you happen to have any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I was going to say I had a similar experience in my group. I had a member from Louisville, Kentucky, which is known as a rubber town, which is something that I learned from her. And we saw the representative from Kentucky, so she was able to speak up about her experience and talk about like what high school she went to and he knew it and things like that. So I feel like that was really impactful. And also something that was interesting about her was that she was a fellow for BFFP's coalition. So I really admire BFFP empowering and also funding community local champions to be able to go to DC and speak up. So the fact that she was able to have a fellowship that helped teach her all these amazing talking points and like the science, and then was being like received the funding to go from Kentucky to DC to advocate was really important. So I think something that we do working forward as an organization is really should be to empower those local champions because they are experts. And again, we know the story personally. She said that her mother and her brother had cancer and stuff like that was really impactful to hear to the representative.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's powerful hearing it now even. Yeah, thank you for sharing that example, Aminah.
Thank you. And if there's any questions, feel free to raise your hand. But I also want to kind of flip it for you, Evan and Aminah. Do you have any questions for our Virginia attendees here? Anything that they might need help with to help establish collaborations and partnerships in Virginia with earthday.org?
Yeah, well, one thing that I'd love to share is that it's never too early to start thinking about Earth Day 2026. And what we always love to see more than anything when it comes to a commemoration of Earth Day is not just a celebration of the planet, but also a focus on charting a path forward towards a solution that lasts in perpetuity. And so for us, that could mean if you're organizing a community get-together of some kind, invite an elected official into the conversation and create space in which community members can raise their concerns about plastics in the community and propose solutions that they would like to see taken in local government, as an example. We actually have a community roundtable toolkit that can walk you through that process as well if anyone's interested. Or similarly, if you want to organize a cleanup for Earth Day, consider how this can also be an opportunity to collect data on the way that the community is being affected by plastic pollution. Think about how you can take the results of that cleanup and take it to decision makers who can help create a future in which we don't have to keep going back to that site over and over again, cleaning it again. I can't speak for any of your communities, of course, but I know here in DC, there's a few places where I must have conducted the same community 5 to 10 times at this point. It just keeps coming back until the council eventually will listen and improve services accordingly. And so, yeah, if you have ideas that you would love to explore for Earth Day, we'd love to hear them. I'm going to add my contact information to the chat here. Feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I will too.
And
I'll add that also just a reminder that our health report is going to be coming at the end of October, and that will hopefully be really useful to you guys when you try to articulate the health impacts to say it's the microplastic particles and the chemicals that have been linked to health issues like endocrine disruption, neurotoxicity, inflammation, all these things. So hopefully that report will be helpful to you guys as well when you talk about this issue.
yes, absolutely, Aminah. Yeah, we would love for our report to be of service to any of the work that you're doing. And if you happen to have upcoming advocacy opportunities that are ready to be shared now, feel free to go ahead and do so. But of course, if those are emergent over time, especially as we start looking towards ways in which Virginia might become more open to plastics policy over the next months and years. We'd love for our doors to stay open. We'd love to stay in touch with all of you. I suppose one question that I have that Joseph had briefly mentioned in one of our preceding meetings to this call was around what state level work on plastics may be looking like moving forward. There was a couple of vague issue areas that we wanted to understand a little bit better. One of those being the possibility of local governments being granted more authority to make determinations around phasing out plastic on their own accord. If we see any possibilities for state government creating that possibility. And I had also heard from one of our interns actually that they had worked in the past state legislature on a bill around plastic pellets. And I'm wondering if anyone here has heard about the reintroduction of a similar bill in the current or future legislature.
Yeah, Zach, go ahead.
There is hope that it will be reintroduced, but it is an uphill battle for the legislation to be passed. The industry pushback on it was that it would hit such a wide variety of businesses in Virginia, and so it's a breakdown to the Virginia pollutant discharge elimination system. There's a side that's saying that the permit system is working to keep pellets out. There are those of us who are finding the pellets in the river directly next to production facilities, and we have evidence that it's not working. Last year, our colleague Ellie Wilson from Environment Virginia brought in a jar of pellets that she picked up outside the Advanced 6 facility in Hopewell, which has a slew of Clean Air and Clean Water Act violations. And in the committee hearing with that jar of pellets, we were told it wasn't a problem.
Wow.
But we know it's a problem and we are actively working on it.
Yes. Thank you for the insight, Zach. That's very helpful. And yeah, it's unfortunate but understandable, some of the uphill challenges that we're facing there. I feel that bringing pellets and physical evidence should be effective. At least anyone who's willing to listen in good faith, I would hope, would see that as powerful. I know that when we were last up at Capitol Hill, a member of my group did the same from 5 gyres. She brought a jar of nurdles that were taken from Lavaca Bay in Texas, alongside photographic evidence of the extent of some of the spills. And I can only speak absolutely for myself, but I found it to be very moving. I think that it's a tactic that we should continue to use moving forward. Hopefully we can find other ways of documenting evidence as well. Clearly we all know that this is an issue that regulations need to be strengthened. And if we can provide irrefutable proof, I'm not sure what else would even be left to say in opposition to that.
I would say that the recent Taariq-Sidibe lawsuit win in Pennsylvania could be a good source to look at, since I know a lot of their data was collected by local grassroots organizations, and they were able to have a really quick lawsuit. So.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that, Aminah. I wasn't actually personally aware. I'm glad that Taariq-Sidibe's being held accountable.
It was yeah, it was regarding pellets that were Taariq-Sidibe was leaking to the water well. So now they're completely restricted from doing so.
Oh wait, I think I do remember hearing about. Was this also near Beaver County, or am I thinking of a separate?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. That was a long time coming. Yeah, environmental justice advocates had been working hard. Similarly to the facility that Zach shared about, Taariq-Sidibe had been violating the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act almost daily since they opened. And I mean, the community was facing noticeable health impacts. I'm glad that they're finally starting to get at least some justice.
Thank you for your input, Zach. To your first part of the question, Evan, is there anyone who can speak to how or in what capacity localities and counties in Virginia could get more authority?
So I'll have to speak on this as someone living in DC. There's probably more familiarity here. In fact, I think I'll just pitch this over to Zach, but my perspective from the outside is that local governments should be granted more government authority to take on these issues themselves. Zach, I'd love to hear your insights.
So we are a Dillon rule state, and localities only have the authority to enact policies that they have been given so by the General Assembly. And with plastics, it's even tougher because in the 1980s, Fairfax County tried to set up a bottle deposit program, and there's specific legislation that goes further than the Dillon rule that stops localities from putting any kind of ban on plastic products. The strategy that we've talked about in the past to get more control for local governments is to set up zones through proffer as new developments are getting built. So if there's a new shopping center going in or strip mall, put it into the rules for that location that any facilities in there can't use single-use plastics. That's the best workaround to the Dillon rule that we've been able to come up with.
It's good insight, Zach. Yeah, the Dillon rule is quite frustrating in some ways. It sounds like it would be an uphill battle to overturn it in full. I'm hopeful that eventually something along those lines can happen. In the meantime, ensuring that new development does have the plastics policies that we want seems like a good approach.
Thank you for the talk. We are nearing the end of our time, so I just want to send a huge thank you and a virtual round of applause to Evan and Aminah. Thank you so much for being here. Everyone else, you have Aminah's and Evan's contacts in the chat, so please feel free to reach out. Feel free to reach out to Clean Virginia Waterways for anything as well. And thank you again for your time. This is a really great discussion, and looking forward to seeing where else we can take our partnerships.
Yeah, likewise, Joseph. Thank you all for a wonderful conversation today. I hope to connect with some of you soon, and have a wonderful rest of your days.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, y'all. This was super helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good one.